Hey, I'm trying this again. Hopefully this works this time. I'm Shahida Hill and this is West Georgia Live. I'm trying to go live every Wednesday, which we only have one more Wednesday. I may continue this on until November just because there's been a lot of technical difficulties with me going live. I was trying to use a new software, but perhaps that didn't work. So, and both times it was because people couldn't hear me at first. So, thank you for joining me. If you're watching the replay, this is just an opportunity for people that are living in West Georgia or thinking about moving to West Georgia to ask me questions for it could be a buyer question, seller questions, just community questions. And I'm going to talk unless I get somebody that asks a question and then I'll answer it. But the things I'm going to talk about today is what I'm seeing, um, any of the hesitation that I'm seeing about buyers considering moving to West Georgia. And then on the seller side, some of the things that if you're trying to sell your house in West Georgia, what I would recommend that you do to make your house more marketable. So we're going to talk about that. But first, I did want to mention I didn't go live last week because my children were on fall break, so I just took the week off. But my children were surprisingly in the newspaper. So if you saw this newspaper around in the West Georgia area, if you live here, they were highlighted by Douglas County Schools as siblings that made perfect scores on their GMAS, and not on the whole GMAS, but like on science and math. And so I thought that was pretty cool. So if you saw this in the local supermarket or the gas station, then those are my children. So we really do live here. If any, because I'll get a lot of that. People are like, well, where do you live exactly? Well, I live in Douglas County, but I do cover the whole channel covers because I used to just have Destination Douglasville. So I've expanded now that I have a team. So I do Douglas County, West Cobb, which West Cobb for me is Mableton, Powder Springs, Austell, Smyrna. We would do that area. Paulding County, all of Paulding County, Carroll County, and South Fulton. So those are the areas that we cover. So if you have any questions about those areas, you're thinking about moving to those areas, or you're thinking about selling in those areas, then please ask or contact me. All of my information is below. So right now, our team is working with about 10 different buyers that are thinking of moving to one of the counties in West Georgia. And what we're finding is because I would say 70% of our clients are moving from out of state. And so, two of the hesitations that they typically have about moving to West Georgia is usually not wanting an HOA, which, if they want a newer home in the West Georgia area, it's probably going to have an HOA. And the other one is not wanting a house on a septic tank. So, and what I tell them, depending on their price point, because it can go either way. If their price point is on the lower end and they have to do an older home, a lot of those homes in West Georgia, particularly Carroll County, Paulding County, Douglas County, Cobb County, you see fewer homes on septic tank. But in the affordable range, then they're probably going to be on a septic tank because they're older. But then if you're buying a newer home and you want land, then those homes are also going to be on, and those are usually on the higher end, but those are also usually going to be on a septic tank. So those are two things that we may start off with clients and we'll say, okay, we'll only show you things not in HOA, or we'll only show you things that don't have septic tanks. But generally speaking, they usually move toward HOAs and septic tanks because they're really going to limit their options when they don't do those two things. So if you're thinking about moving here, and I probably should do a whole video on septic tanks and HOAs so people won't be as afraid. But if you're thinking about moving here, then that's one of the two things I think you should be comfortable with. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. We had some technical difficulties earlier, so I am going to be here as long as you have questions. So Tay has a question. I'll put it up. Tay says, yeah, a lot of folks are tired of all the HOA overreach. Do you feel HOAs truly contribute to the maintaining of property values? It, honestly, it really depends on the HOA subdivision. So if they're I would lean toward it, but it's not always true. I would lean toward HOAs do hold property values, but I would also say the higher price range of the home, then if it doesn't have an HOA, generally those property values are kept because you're buying a more expensive house. So some of those things like lawn maintenance, and that's the majority of how you're going to upkeep your property, is probably going to be better than on the lower end. But you'll find most higher end properties, if they're in a subdivision, then they're going to have an HOA. So I would say and my main thing with HOAs is they it's hard for you to find a home if you don't at least open up yourself to the possibility of an HOA. And a lot of people think because they're not in a HOA subdivision that they can do whatever they want, right? And there's still ordinances and there's still code violations. There's still things that you cannot do at your house. And the same people that are like, well, I want to do whatever I want to do. So if you want to do whatever you want to do, oftentimes your neighbor wants to do whatever they want to do. And then there's like a conflict. So I would say in this day and age, if everybody's on the same page, if you move to HOA subdivision, you know it's an HOA, you know that there's rules. So you're almost coming in, everybody that's buying into that is coming into, I've agreed to this. Versus, if you're not moving into HOA subdivision, you don't know, there's no agreement between you and your neighbors as to how things are going to be kept. And there's no standard. So that's just a risk that you take. But I would say if you're in an established neighborhood and you're like, I don't want to be in HOA, then do more research about, how if the upkeep is not good when you buy, the upkeep's probably not going to be good. But if the upkeep, is good and people are taking care of their properties, then it may maintain that without an HOA. So, but know also your ordinances and your zoning to be just careful of that. And often when I have clients that are moving from out of town and we're doing like videos instead of they're not like here, I always take a video, not just of the house they're looking at, but then I'll take a video, HOA or no HOA. These are your neighbors. And then, your neighbor has a trailer. Your neighbor has 5 dogs and they're all in the backyard, because they need to be aware of what they're getting into, because you'll fall in love with a house, but you also need to fall in love with that neighborhood. All right. Thank you, Tay. I'm going to get another question from Tay as well. Also, what are your thoughts on Villa Rica? Do you feel that the area is growing now that Douglasville is getting more pricey? Yes. And so Villa Rica, some of Villa Rica is in Carroll County, some of Villa Rica is in Douglas County. So it is growing. If the more I have clients that are moving here, their children live on 166, and they wanted to move close to them, but not on 166 because they wanted to be closer to shopping. So we found them a house off of Chapel Hill, but I also wanted to bring them to Villa Rica, like the Mirror Lake area, because they wanted a ranch home. So they have at least 5 builders in the Mirror Lake area that are building new construction homes all within the same vicinity. There's a new Publix out there. There are other things that are coming in that area. So I thought that would be a good area for them, but they thought it was too far. So 2 things I want you to be mindful of with Villa Rica. Villa Rica is going through a lot of growth, kind of like Douglas County or Douglasville went through a lot of growth. They're going through a lot of growth. And they have, depending on if you're in the city limits or not, they have their own mayor, their own thing. And there's been a lot of things in the news recently about Villa Rica. And you have to be mindful. And a lot of the people that have lived there for a while, a lot of the homeowners are fighting some of the development for Villa Rica. So you want to make sure that you're aware of what's going on. That's a video that I probably need to do as well, but just be aware of what's coming soon to Villa Rica, because that area is growing. I also heard a rumor that Villa Rica was trying to be added to Coweta County. I don't know how true that is. I'm going to do some more research with that. But I don't know what part of Villa Rica they're speaking of, and whether that is actually a thing. But if you're thinking about moving to Villa Rica, then you just want to make sure that you're aware of what's going on. And their homes that I was looking at were more affordable than the homes that were closer, like Chapel Hill Road area. But the distance, at least for my clients, the distance wasn't worth it for them. They didn't want to be that far. So they took Villa Rica off the list. So just know that Villa Rica, when y'all are watching the news in the morning, usually you always hear like starting at, well, you really hear like Fairburn Road up. But sometimes if there's an accident like on Fairburn, I'm talking about I-20 for those of you, our major highway leaving West Georgia is I-20. So the further back you get on the I-20 exits, the longer your commute is going to be into Atlanta. So I've had clients that did consider Villa Rica for the price because it was less expensive, but both of them recently decided to move to Douglas County because of the commute. One of them worked in Fulton County, like in South Fulton. The other one, we're just moving here and wanted to be closer to shopping than that area. So I hope I'm answering your question. Villa Rica definitely is growing, and they're having growing pains. They've been on the news recently. That's why it's top of mind with the community complaining about some of the ways that they're growing. So yes, and it will become, when one area gets too expensive, then, and the price difference really isn't dramatic. It's just some of the newer homes were more affordable. So I would say that as one area, people think that Douglas County is getting pricey, right? So they're going to move to the next available area, which would be Carroll County, or the more rural part of Douglas County, right? So you're going to find that eventually it's going to be the same. People are moving to Carroll County for that same reason. So we have to just be mindful of, the sprawl. My parents moved to, or my mom moved to Paulding County in the 90s. And nobody was out there at the time. Paulding County has grown, but it took like 20 years or so for it to grow to what it is now. But, a lot of people are reaping those benefits of buying those homes when there was nothing out there. There was like a 1 lane in, 1 lane out of Paulding County. So just Villa Rica is definitely growing. So hopefully I answered your question. Let me see. There's another question. Monsoon says, yep, you hit the nail on the head. I've considered Villa Rica, but it's just too far. And I don't know about resale unless you're someone who wants a lot of land. Yeah. And that's the reason why a lot of people move to that area, is because they want land. A lot of people, like one client wants to stay in Villa Rica, but she's retired. So there's not a lot of, she doesn't have to get up every morning and go. There are townhomes that are being built. There are some in Douglas County, Douglasville, and there's some in Villa Rica. Same builder. There's probably about a $30,000 difference. They're cheaper. The ones that are in Villa Rica are less expensive. But, to get 2 exits up, she decided on the one in Douglasville. So you have to just look. A commute is a big thing. If you're still working, you have to like go out to work every day. Like my husband goes out to work every day, right? So the commute is a big deal. And those 2 exits or so, 2 or 3 exits make a big difference. So that's something that you definitely want to consider. So the other thing, so I talked about HOAs and septics. Thank you guys for those questions. Thank you for joining me on this live. I appreciate it. Another thing, and if you are joining me or if you're even watching the replay of this, then go ahead and just put questions in the comments and I'll answer those when I see them, later in the week. So if you're selling your home in West Georgia, these are the things that when we're dealing with buyers that are moving to West Georgia, what they are complaining or what they don't like. One is flooring. So, and I'm thinking like my house was built in 2005. And it was a D.R. Horton home in 2005. And a lot of things that the builder did is still what everybody still has in their home. And if you are a lot of buyers are comparing your resale property with new construction. So they want to see some of those newer things in your home. So if you want to sell, because what I'm seeing is people are putting their homes up for like definitely market price, but their home hasn't been updated since, the early 2000s. So one thing is the flooring. So if you can get, even in luxury homes now, they're putting that luxury vinyl plank. It's not hardwood. It is like a harder vinyl plank that is installed like hardwood. So it has that look kind of hardwood, but it's easier on the maintenance of the product because you can just mop it. You can just, have like a light damp cloth and clean it. And that's what they're putting in all new construction homes for the most part. So if you can, before you sell, that's something that you could do kind of affordably. Even if you only do it on the main level, people are looking for that, that really clean look of LVP nowadays. Lighting. If your lighting is still old, that's an easy fix. I'm trying to think of affordable things that you can do that won't cost a lot, but it will make a difference in the resale of your home. If you could update your lighting and your lighting fixtures, that can make a big difference. And then painting. You just don't know how bad different color paint looks on like Zillow. People want a neutral look. They don't want, all these different colors. You'll see on, Zillow and Trulia when people are selling their homes. One room is like a bright blue, another room is an orange, another room is a different color. I sold a home in Chapel Hills recently, and the whole basement was orange. And when I did the listing consultation, I said, hey, this might be an issue. And it was very nice. It was remodeled downstairs. The basement was lovely. They had a theater in there that was lovely. But I was like, the orange is really not going to show well. A lot of people may not like it. It's very bright. And the seller was like, well, I love it. And that sort of thing. But when you're selling your house, it's not about you. It's about what the majority of the people would like. So we were able to sell it, sold it for cash, which was great. But you have to be mindful of that. And it was because like those were the last pictures that I put. The majority of the house was pretty neutral. It was just that basement area that they used that orange. So other things kind of, that wasn't the main focus. And, strategically, I made sure it wasn't the main focus. Some of the other things that were really beautiful about the home that I tried to highlight. But if you can paint your house a neutral color, then that would be great. And then lastly, people love their kitchens, and kitchens generally photograph well. And back in the 2000s, just like my house, I'm considering painting my cabinets right now because of it, but I'm not trying to sell my house. So if you're trying to sell your house, you want to at least get a quote on how much it would cost for you to paint your cabinets, because it really just looks better in pictures. Generally speaking, when you see like all of the new construction homes generally have a lighter color cabinets, whether it's a light gray or a white or some kind of light color, where a lot of the older homes still have the mahogany, the wood, that sort of thing. So I would definitely get a quote. I got a quote on mine. It was about $2,500. And not only, I would want it painted, but I also would want like all the fixtures changed. So that's another thing that I'm looking into. So those are some of the things that if you are living in West Georgia, whether you're buying or selling, some of the things that you should be mindful of. If you have any questions, you need an agent in the area, definitely reach out to me. All of my information is below. And thank you guys for joining me. Sorry about the technical difficulties earlier. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.